Hey, what's going on, beautiful jellyfish? It's Tracy. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of time today to hang out with me. I really appreciate it. And in today's video, we are going to be doing a different video. I don't think I've ever done this before, where basically I'm talking about cards that I just no longer run. I just no longer vibe with, I'm moving away from, and for whatever reason, and each of these cards does have a specific reason. I just want to also be clear, that doesn't mean that I think these cards are bad. Most of the time it's just because I found an alternative that's just better. And I'll kind of explain for each one of these things, but if you run any of these cards, it doesn't mean that I don't like them, or they're not good budget alternatives, or they're not good cards. And I think the other thing too as well is for some of these as well, it's I've just found something better, or it's something that just maybe is cheaper mana or something like that. So anyways, let's just get into it. So we're going to first start talking about a card that I believe I actually still have, and some of these too. I know it says cards I no longer run. Maybe I have one copy still laying around. Once I get something else, it might come out of the deck. So Yaviyama Elder. So very interestingly, I have two kind of Lands Matters decks. I have Omnath, which is my OG Lands Matters decks, where I'm trying to capitalize and get a ton of lands. And the second I have is AC. I totally forgot that commander's name for a second. I was like, what is that commander? And they're similar, they're also definitely a little bit different. And so one thing that was interesting about it is thinking about the cards that I had in Omnath that I also decided to put in AC, because AC is more recent than my build than Omnath. And Yaviyama is just one of those cards that just didn't make the cut. And so my thought process behind this card is I just feel it's a lot of mana for what it is. It's 5 mana total to get 2 lands to your hand and to get, and I believe they're basics. Yeah, basics, which is fine. And then you also get to draw a card, but that's only if you sacrifice it. So my thought process is you play this on turn 3, someone swings into it, you block, and then you don't get the capitalize and draw a card, and then you get 2 lands. There's so many other things that I think I would just rather play at this point than this card. I think I have a shiny one in Omnath, and I think that's the only one that I own still. And like I said, that'll probably come out once I get something. It might already be out. I honestly don't know. I haven't played Omnath in a really long time, so who knows these days. But anyways, Yaviyama Elder, I just think that there's better personally alternatives in that sense. I'd rather be running a Cultivator or something like that, and if I'm running a creature, it's probably a card like Solemn Simulacrum. So yeah. Okay, the next card, this card is honestly hilarious, because if you've watched any of my Card King videos, you've seen, me going through and decluttering cards, you've seen this card, and that is Staff of Nin. I think that Staff of Nin is just so ridiculously expensive for what it is, and I just think that there are way, 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 way better cards out there. So here's my problem with a card like Staff of Nin, is you spend 6 mana to play Staff of Nin, and you're waiting to draw a card. Maybe you ping someone, whatever, or you ping a creature, whatever it is that you do, and then somebody goes to kill it, or blow up the board, or blow up these artifacts before you've even capitalized off of it. Cards like that don't immediately do something, or it takes a minute and you've spent 6 mana into it, cards like that really bother me, because I feel I haven't done anything and it hasn't impacted the board, it hasn't gotten me anywhere. I think that there are other things that you can definitely run that are ways that you can draw cards that are significantly cheaper. And I think if you're playing a color that maybe doesn't necessarily have as much card draw, this is a card that you might look for as an option. But I honestly just think there's better things if you don't get around to your end step, and it only also does 1 card, you know what I mean? So I think that there's just other things that you could run too. Okay, the next card is Karmic Guide. And Karmic Guide originally came into my realm when I was building it for Angels, because it's an Angel. And the thing that I ended up taking it out for Angels was because I don't really have things dying in Angels, unless they're getting sacrificed or they're getting exiled, which creatures don't often have. That's what's going to happen in Avacyn, because they are indestructible. So the thing about Karmic Guide is I just find it very CMC heavy. You're going to be noticing a pattern in this video. I'm very big about CMC heavy these days. And so you pay 5 mana, you get a 2/2, it's flying pro black, and you do get a creature back from the yard, and I think that this can be really helpful. And I think in the right deck where you're able to capitalize off of Karmic Guide, I think it's an incredible card. But my problem was I didn't really have other ways to really capitalize off of Karmic Guide, and so the problem became I would do that, I would get that creature, and then I would just let Karmic Guide die. But if I wanted it to stick around, for it being a flying pro black 2/2, which is pretty good, I was a little bummed because I had to pay the echo cost, which was 5 mana. And so then I'm paying 10 mana into this, which to me just felt a lot of mana. So in that particular build, in Avacyn, it just didn't work is basically the problem. And I think I had it in other things, but now that I'm thinking about it, I don't even honestly remember what other decks I had it in, because I remember having, like, guys, I owned at like 1.4 foils, and I was like, what was I doing with those four foils? I have no idea. I think I had it in like old builds that I just like no longer have. But anyways, I think if you're playing a deck that synergizes with Karmic, I think it's a fine card. I just think for me and like what I had, it just didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So okay, next up we have Mulldrifter. Mulldrifter is an interesting one because I think what I realized was that I never wanted to dump 5 mana into hard casting this card, and then you're left with a 2/2 flyer. And then at that point, it was like, okay, well then I'm paying 3 mana to draw 2 cards, which is fine. But the problem is I just feel like there were other things that I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be running cards maybe instead of this, like Opt, for example, was a card that I wanted to be running instead of a card like Mulldrifter. Yes, I don't get to see 2 cards, but I only get to see 1 card, and it's instant speed. This being a creature didn't really like do a ton for me. I think in the grand scheme of things, and there were just never times where I realistically wanted to hard cast this card. So I think it would honestly take a really special type of builds for me to consider running Mulldrifter, but even in a deck like Tasigur where it makes sense because it's a creature, I cast it for 2 cards, I'm just running other things these days. So next up, I have Acidic Slime. I actually believe I still do own maybe 1 or 2 copies of Acidic Slimes in decks. I don't think that Acidic Slime is a bad card by any means. My biggest problem, I think, with this card was that I'm paying 3 mana to destroy an artifact or enchantment, which I love. I run a ton of cards that destroy artifacts or enchantments. My biggest problem basically with this is that I feel like it's 5 mana to do that. So you're paying 3 mana to destroy an artifact or enchantment, and then you're left with a 2/2. I'm going to be running a card like Reclamation Sage over a card like this. Yes, I'm left with the 2 and it doesn't have Death Touch, but honestly, I just don't care. I don't think that Death Touch does enough for me personally for this card to make it worthwhile. So I'm just running something else like Reclamation Sage, pretty much. So the next card is Sidisi, Undead Vizier. Vizier? Who knows? Okay, so I love tutors. It's one of my personal favorite things to do. However, what I was noticing with this card is that I was getting Sidisi and exploiting herself. And at that point, I just want to be casting my demonic tutor over this. Like, this being a creature didn't really matter. And I think that was my biggest problem with it, is like, I was just rather running an instant or a sorcery tutor that's much less mana than that. There were way too many instances with this card where I was just exploiting herself because the board had just been wiped. I was desperate. I didn't want to let my other creatures go for whatever reason, whatever it was. And this was just it. And then I'm missing out on that 4/6 Death Touch. If you're running a deck where you have like a ton of creatures, a ton of tokens, whatever it is, I think that this card is worthwhile. But for me, I just ran into that instant too many times, and I couldn't make Sidisi work for me anymore, which is a bummer, as I have like a lot of this card and I have like a lot of foils of it, and it's just no longer a card that I'm realistically running. I've talked a lot in this video about CMC. That's been a common theme of this video. And for this next card, it's kind of a series of cards, bigger creatures, a lot of them. And I feel like my whole thing is if I'm spending 5, 6, 7 mana on a card, it needs to be doing a lot of things. And so to give one example of a card that I no longer run, Jin Gitaxias. I'm talking about the newer Jin Gitaxias, not the OG Jin Gitaxias. I know I've never run the old Jin Gitaxias, and I probably never will. It's just not really a card that I could see myself running. It's very good. That's not to say that I don't like it, but new Jin Gitaxias is a card, for example, that I had in Riku, actually. And my big thing with this card in Riku was it was way too expensive. And the thing about Riku too is that deck is so CMC sensitive. Like, it's probably my most CMC sensitive deck. And I don't mean like colors. I mean, well, colors partially, but I'm realistically also talking about like, I cannot afford to waste mana in that deck. Like, every card needs to be in there because it's like a bomb card. And I really like Jin Gitaxias. I bought it when it first came out, and I think that it's good. Whenever you cast an artifact, instant or sorcery, you copy it and you may choose new targets. Now, it only does happen once each turn, which obviously makes sense because other than that, it would be absolutely ridiculous. And then when an opponent casts their artifact sorcery, you counter it. Now, this card is really good, and you're thinking of this like, this is a great card. It is a great card. I just realistically found in Riku, it just was so much. And I was just like, I'd rather have an instant that, you know, copies a spell for 2 mana rather than this creature that's very susceptible to removal, if that makes sense. Because you know when you play this card, someone's going to try to remove it. And yes, it does stop your opponents, and it's not to say that, but just in general, big creatures, if they're not having this massive, ridiculous impact for me, I just find I can't run those sorts of things. You know what I mean? Another really good example is a card like Razaketh that I'm moving away from. Not because I don't think Razaketh is good, but I just find it so much mana. I'd rather have an instance that's 3 mana or 2 mana that tutors for me rather than this big creature that's so susceptible to removal that I play it and then it gets removed and then I'm like, oh, that's a bummer, you know? Win harder cards are my next thing, and it's so funny because I think this is a thing that when I first started playing Magic, I really enjoyed cards like this, but cards that just help me win harder are just not cards that are super attractive to me. And I'll give you an example, a card like True Conviction. This card is not bad. I just want to be really clear. I really hope that point is like being made clear, because I don't think that True Conviction is bad. I don't think Jin Gitaxias is bad. It's just not right for the deck that I specifically needed it for, as an example. And True Conviction is a card to me that I just don't think I need to play. This would be a card, for example, that I would run in Avacyn. But the problem with that is that Avacyn is another deck similar to Riku, where it's very sensitive about how I'm spending my mana. And so, for example, I would rather be spending, like, what would I take out of Avacyn these days that I would run True Conviction for? Because that deck does not have slots. It just doesn't. It's at that point where, like, I love my 100, and, like, what am I taking out? So whatever I put in that deck needs to be amazing. And True Conviction is a good card, but it is a lot of mana. And at that point, what am I taking out to put this in? Because I'm not taking out any of my mana acceleration, because that's going to be a card that's going to help me cast my other things that I really need for. And the other thing as well is with a card like this is it just wins me the game harder. If I've got Avacyn and 3 other angels out, there's a really good chance that I'm already winning the game. I don't need True Conviction to help me win the game faster, if that makes sense. I already have lifelink, and I have a lot of other ways to do it. The double strike, I mean, I can kill someone a turn faster with Avacyn, which is not bad, but I just don't necessarily think that I need it, you know? Okay. The next card is Burnished Hart, and I might still have, honestly, a copy of Burnished Hart in something. I realistically don't know. I might still have it in, like, Omnath, but my thing with a card like Burnished Hart is I just think that there are things that I found that I run that are just a little bit on the more mana less side. So it's 3 mana, and then you can sack it to get 2 basics. You do put them on the battlefield tapped, but I think for 6 mana, there's just so many things that are just better alternatives. I was also playing these in decks like Green that already have so many other amazing things like Cultivate and things like that. So I was already running them in conjunction side by side. I just don't feel like I needed this. I also just would rather run an instant or sorcery than a creature at that point. And very similarly to that is Wayfarer's Bauble. In my opinion, if you're thinking about running this card, I would just pick up an Expedition Map instead, because it's a way better card. Expedition Map does go to your hand, but you get any land, where this card's basic and you only put it on the battlefield tap. I don't think that this card is bad. I think that if you're playing this card and you're like on a budget, it's about, you can pick this up for like 20-30 cents, but I just think that there's like something like a card like Expedition Map that I think that you could run, and it's like literally the same CMC. It's like 1 and then 2 to sack it. Yeah, it goes to the battlefields, but I don't think that's necessarily worth a card like this that doesn't immediately impact. You need 3 mana. Like if you play this card on turn 1 and then you're like turn 2 do it, I feel like you're moving pretty slow by doing those things, and I think I just want to be doing things that are moving a little bit faster. So anyways, guys, let me know how you feel about this video. Let me know what you think. I really don't want this to come across as like, oh, like there's bad. I just think that there's things that are alternatives that are a little bit better in a lot of these instances. And also let me know too if you're fine, like, could you give me, because I didn't give alternatives for every single card, but let me know if I do these in the future. if you're like, Tracy, please give an alternative that you think would be better. Now, it would probably just be one for the sake of the time of this video. I don't want to be sitting here doing like, here's 7 alternatives, because that's just going to take a really, really long time. I could also, the other option too is I could do 5 cards instead, and that way that could open me up to maybe giving me like 3 different alternatives. So I'm not set on this format, so definitely let me know if you'd like to see another part, and let me know how you'd like the format of this video to be, because I feel like I didn't have alternatives on the ready, like in the top of my head for these cards. So anyways, just let me know. So anyways, guys, if you did enjoy this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and I'll catch you on the next one.